A very warm welcome to this episode of our conversation series, Sustainability in the Next Era. The challenges of today are unlike anything we faced before. As many argue that the pandemic has a positive environmental impact, boosting economic recovery would put extreme pressure on natural resources that no one has yet calculated. Is the world ready to recover? Could it be a sustainable recovery? Could we overcome the planet versus development argument during the recovery? In our Sustainability in the Next Era conversation series, we aspire to trigger thoughts within MENA and beyond around the future of sustainability. Crises usually become turning points, for good or for bad. Part of today's conversation around COVID-19 pandemic is on how it's changing the status quo and on the need for a different model for recovery across borders. Multilateral financing institutions and the lenders community were among the first to analyze the consequences and to put together immediate response packages for their clients. More importantly, these institutions are launching recovery plans and reviewing progress made by countries and clients in order to channel their programs accordingly. Today, to talk about this and more, we're honored to host Dr. Heike Harmgart, the Managing Director for the Southern and Eastern Mediterranean region at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Heike, we're very glad that you could join us.
Thank you, Ruba. I'm really pleased to be with you this morning and also discussing such an important topic at such a timely juncture of what you rightly described as sort of a turning or tipping point where I think all of our actions matter the most. So I'm very much looking forward to the conversation over the next half an hour to sort of see what institutions like the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD, can do to support a tilt towards green. So looking forward.
Thank you, Heike. So as an economist, are you satisfied with the overall economic response for COVID-19 from international institutions? And if there's one or two things that you could do better, what would they be?
Thank you. I mean, what I have to say, I was very positively surprised how a lot of the institutions, multilateral and bilateral, on the speed of the reaction. So I think EBRD was also one of the first to come up with a solidarity package for the countries we work in. I'm responsible for what we call the Southern and Eastern Mediterranean, or the MENA region. And I think we had really within a few weeks a sizable package ready to help our existing clients and then governments to go through the first phase of the direct impact of the crisis. So to make sure that our clients don't have to, can pay salaries, can really go to the first phase of the crisis. And then I think we all work together to see what can we do to make sure that the medium-term and long-term recovery plan really doesn't lose any of the gains, in particular around sustainability, that were made over the previous years. And I think there we are all still working really hard with the government and our partners to make sure that we design the right instruments to give the right incentives for countries and companies to think not just about today, but really about tomorrow. And I feel there we are all still sort of in a phase where we're trying out different instruments, trying to see what works, what doesn't, and trying to see what we can do to exactly change this tipping point towards a green recovery.
That's fantastic. And how do you see the response from governments and also from banks and companies? Because as you correctly said, financing can be the trigger or the incentive for more responsible and sustainable business.
So I think at the beginning, it's understandable that everyone is just focusing on the immediate crisis response and doesn't think more medium term and is actually worried about their own business. So what we saw at the beginning also, it was a lot of banks that approached us to on-lend to their small and medium enterprises, not so much the big companies. And I think it's normal because the big companies, they still had to think, where am I in this crisis? What do I need to do? How can I recover? And I don't want to have more debt at this point in time. So now we think we're seeing a second wave where companies have made a plan and where we can sort of help. And the same with governments. Of course, governments immediately want support to make sure that they can pay for all these extra health investments. But then I think you already see 2-3 months down the line that governments are also thinking, what do we need to invest in the medium term, and how can we reach out to our different partners to make sure that the medium term is actually, yes, we need to strengthen our health systems, but we need to strengthen the whole economy to make it more resilient. And I think the topic of resilience is actually not a trade-off with green, because I think if you make your economy more sustainable, it is actually also more resilient. So I think that whole thought process is really setting in now, where we see that resilience and sustainability actually can go hand in hand.
But Heike, when we first met, most of the EBRD, let's say, support was directed towards renewable energy and energy efficiency, at least in Jordan. And you have also now this regional holistic overview. So what are the sectors that you think, you mentioned tourism, but how about renewable energy and energy efficiency? Are they still going to be on the radar of the EBRD and other financing institutions? And what new sectors or new maybe subsectors that you see might emerge?
No, absolutely, you're right. I think we've been really happy and proud to be part of this renewable thrive of Jordan, but also Egypt. We're one of the largest financiers of Benban. I think that's one of the few solar installations you can see from space. So I think that's been part of our DNA, and I think it's been a great success story in the Middle East. In particular, seeing how prices for generating energy from renewable sources have become so much more competitive. So I think actually this is a good moment to continue on renewable energy, and actually also renewable energy makes you more resilient in a crisis because it's your natural resource locally. But I think the next phase, and also for EBRD, is going to be the next stage of renewables, for example, storage. And I know that sort of a number of the countries in the Middle East are looking for storage. And I think storage is a new critical element, given that you need to stretch the hours of sunlight, so to speak, by storing the energy for a few more hours. And that actually makes you be able to use it more efficiently and more effectively. So I think for EBRD, renewable energy efficiency will remain a huge focus. We are currently looking at our what we call green economy transition 2.1, where I think we will be even more ambitious. So I think we already want to have more than 40% of everything we do in the green economy. And I think going forward, we want to be more ambitious. And I think the Middle East, really, the southern Eastern Mediterranean, is at the heart of that change. Because the resources are amazing, the sun, the wind, but also I think the governments and the companies have made a few very critical regulatory steps in the right direction to reap the benefits now.
Great. And Heike, any other sectors like, for example, solid waste management, waste to energy, some of the new, let's say, climate adaptation related sectors, anything also on the radar?
Absolutely. I think, as you know very well, I think cities, of course, are large engine of energy consumption, resource intensity, and actually also areas where energy and resource efficiency and climate adaptation and mitigation can make the biggest impact. So I think what we've done in a number of the cities across the Middle East, and actually Amman was the first capital city we started with as a green, as part of our green city family, is looking at ways of how cities can still have the same level or even increase the level of services, but in a more sustainable way. So for example, waste to energy is a great example where actually you make the waste management more efficient and safer, but you also will be able to reduce the level of energy you need. And in the case, for example, at Al-Rabawi, we actually generate electricity out of the methane gas from the waste. So I think there are lots of opportunities around waste management, around more efficient urban transport, that are yet unexplored and will really make cities be more livable for the citizens, but also be more effectively and efficiently run. I think there is no, in this sense, not a trade-off necessarily, because if we reduce the energy consumption, it's cheaper for the city to have the same level of service. So I think cities will remain a big priority and a big opportunity for investments in the green economy that actually the citizens realize benefit them. I have to say one thing also for the crisis that can be an opportunity for, in particular, local talent is all of these green investments need a lot of assessment, environmental assessment, energy efficiency assessment, and oftentimes there have been sort of all international companies utilized for these kinds of assignments. And actually now we realize, in particular in the Middle East, in particular sort of in Jordan and Egypt, but also Tunisia and Morocco, there are all these talented engineering companies locally, and they can bid and they can actually play a bigger role in the assessment of anything to do with green economy. So I think actually when we think of this, we have to also think of the whole value chain. And the value creation is also on the whole service sector through engineering and assessments that can be done oftentimes at excellent qualities locally. So I think that's also an opportunity for each of the countries in the Middle East with the continued restrictions on travel to really establish even more their own brands to make sure that a lot of these assessments get done locally.
My last question is, Heike, we've been, we hear a lot about the weak participation of women in the economy in most of the countries of the MENA region. Is there any specific programs that the EBRD is planning to implement? I know that the inclusiveness and all of this should include something about women and gender equality and so on. But is there anything that's more aggressive and more focused for women economic empowerment?
No, absolutely. I think the Middle East is missing a huge part of the opportunities and productivity of the economy. And I think this is, just quoting also, the managing director of the IMF who said, female participation is really macro critical. It is really something that will lift an economy up if the significant improvement in female labor force participation. So I think it's not something nice to have, but it is something really critical and important for an economy, and now more than ever. So I think EBRD, what we do, we try to support banks with our Women in Business program, where we have dedicated credit lines for women-owned or managed businesses. We support organizations like Microfund for Women, who are giving microcredits to female-owned and managed businesses. And we help companies also changing some of their governance. So for example, when we discuss governance and board composition, even with state-owned entities, we always recommend for better decision-making to have an inclusive board with female participation at board level in order to just make better decisions for the companies. So I think we are trying to work at different levels on supporting greater female participation in the labor force. But I think, unfortunately, it is still quite a way to go. We see countries making efforts. I was just last week at the launch of closing the gender gap initiative that Egypt's Minister of International Cooperation did with the World Economic Forum. So which was the first in the MENA region, together with the World Economic Forum. And it did show that there is still some way to go, but also there's huge talent in the female population across the Middle East. And of course, I actually sometimes think more digital means of integrating into the labor market may actually also help. So we see it with startups, we see it now even in the crisis that women can participate through digital means much more flexibly than if they were to be able to be forced to, have 8 hours in one go at a certain office. So I think we also need to be more creative in using technology to integrate women into the labor market.
Absolutely. And on that hopeful note, I'd like to thank you so much, Heike, for being with us and for all the insights you've shared with us.